My doctor husband threw himself in front of a knife to protect the one that got away, taking a blade through his lung and ending up in the ICU. When he woke up, he spoke to the nurse with haughty arrogance. "Get my wife here to take care of me. I won't take my medicine otherwise. She needs to learn what happens when she crosses me." He assumed I'd come crying, begging for his forgiveness. Just like I always did. Until his buddy Jake couldn't stand it anymore and called him, "Dude, stop with the tragic lover act. Your wife already took off her wedding ring and flew to Germany for a medical summit." Her only parting words were, "I hope those two cheaters grow old together." In that moment, he completely lost it. The phone rang. 2 a.m. The screen flashed Central General Hospital emergency room. My stomach dropped. "Dr. Hayes. Doctor, Carter's been in an accident." My hands and feet went cold instantly. I grabbed my car keys and ran out the door, my mind completely blank. A 15-minute drive took me 10, bursting into the emergency room. The thick, metallic stench of blood hit me like a physical blow. Ethan Carter lay on the gurney, his white shirt soaked through with blood, the handle of a fruit knife protruding from his chest. His face was as white as paper, his lips colorless. Male, 34. Stab wound to the chest, BP 80-50. Heart rate 135. My colleagues' voices buzzed in my ears, distant and muffled. I stood frozen, all the strength drained from my body. A figure threw herself onto the bed, sobbing hysterically. It was Lila Hale. She was wearing a white dress, now stained with dirt and blood. Her hair messy, her makeup running. She looked utterly devastated. "Ethan, wake up. Don't scare me." She clutched his hand, crying as if her heart would break. "It's all my fault. I never should have called you. I'm so sorry." The nurses tried to pull her away, but she shook them off violently. "Don't touch me. Ethan got hurt protecting me. I'm staying with him." Watching this scene, I felt sick to my stomach. An hour ago, Ethan had texted me saying there was an emergency meeting at the hospital and he'd be late. His emergency meeting was accompanying his first love. I walked over, my voice dry. "I'm his wife, and I'm a doctor. Let me examine him." My calmness stood in stark contrast to Lila's breakdown. All eyes turned to me. Lila lifted her tear-streaked face. When she saw me, she looked like she'd found both a savior and an enemy. "Ms. Hayes, you're here. I'm so sorry. This is all my fault." She said sorry, but her eyes held a challenging, triumphant glint. I ignored her and leaned down to quickly check Ethan's wound. The knife had entered at a tricky angle. Left chest, dangerously close to the heart. "Prepare for thoracotomy. Take him to the OR immediately. Type and cross 800 cubic centimeters of blood." I looked up and gave the order to the ER director. My professionalism wouldn't allow me to break down now. "Dr. Hayes, are you sure?" The ER director hesitated. "He's my husband. I know his medical history better than anyone." I cut him off. "I'll be first assist." No one argued further. Just as the nurses were about to wheel the gurney away, Ethan's mother and sister burst through the doors. "My son, Ethan." Mrs. Carter saw her son on the gurney and her legs gave out. Mia, his sister, caught her, then turned her gaze on me like a knife. "Claire, you jinx. What happened to my brother?" She lunged forward and shoved me hard in the shoulder. I stumbled but caught myself. "He needs immediate surgery," I said, looking her straight in the eye. Mrs. Carter had recovered by now, and her eyes fell on Lila. Like a switch had been flipped. She charged over and pointed a finger in Lila's face. "You homewrecker. It's always you. Why can't you leave my son alone?" Lila cried even harder. "Auntie, I'm sorry. Get out of here." Mrs. Carter screamed. "Slut." Mia joined in. Lila backed away, her eyes darting to me with a secret look of satisfaction, as if to say, "See, they all know Ethan loves me." I felt nauseous. "Enough." My voice was cold, but it cut through the chaos. "The most important thing right now is saving his life. Do you want him to die on the way to the or because you're all screaming here?" They fell silent. Mrs. Carter's red eyes turned to me, filled with venom. She suddenly lunged at me and slapped me hard across the face. The crack echoed through the emergency room, sharp and loud. My head snapped to the side. my cheek burning with stinging pain. The entire ER fell silent. "This is all your fault. If you hadn't stolen Ethan's wife's spot, Lila wouldn't have suffered, and my son wouldn't have risked his life fighting for her." She pointed a trembling finger at me, her voice shrill and piercing. "If anything happens to him, I'll make sure you're buried right next to him." I slowly turned my head to look at her twisted face. I said nothing. The pain in my chest was far worse than the pain on my cheek, so in all their eyes, I was the one who shouldn't exist. The surgery lasted 4 hours. I stood at the operating table, watching the chief surgeon cut open Ethan's chest, watching the knife being carefully removed. The tip had pierced his lung, less than a centimeter from his heart. When the blood gushed out, my heart skipped a beat. The surgery was a success. Ethan was transferred to the ICU. I took off my scrubs and walked out of the OR, soaked in sweat. Mrs. Carter and Mia were waiting outside. Lila was there too, now in clean clothes, her eyes still red. When she saw me, Mrs. Carter rushed over. "How is my son?" "The surgery was successful, but he's not out of the woods yet. He'll be in the ICU for 48 hours for observation," I stated calmly. At the words "not out of the woods," Mrs. Carter's face turned even whiter. Mia held her up and glared at me hatefully. "You better pray my brother makes it." I didn't look at them again. I dragged my leaden legs to the doctor's lounge. I needed somewhere quiet to be alone. I'd barely sat down when Lila followed me in, closing the door softly behind her. "Ms. Hayes." She stood in front of me, her voice soft and weak. "Thank you for today, Anne." "I'm sorry." I looked up at her. There was no remorse in her eyes, only the smugness of a winner. "Ethan told me I'm the person he regrets hurting the most in his life. He said he'd do anything to make it up to me." She paused, as if savoring my reaction. "He said he only married you for your family connections and your career. He never loved you. Ms. Hayes, you're a good person, and a great doctor. Let him go, for both your sakes." She bowed deeply and turned to leave. The second the door clicked shut, all the strength drained from my body. I slid down the cold wall until I was sitting on the floor. So my 5-year marriage had been nothing but a joke. What I'd thought was a perfect, harmonious marriage had been nothing more than a transaction to him, and I'd been the biggest fool in the whole deal. A metallic taste rose in my throat, and I covered my mouth, coughing violently. Cold, bitter tears finally spilled over. I don't know how long I sat there, until my phone rang. It was the ICU nurse. "Dr. Hayes, Dr. Carter is awake." I composed myself, my voice hoarse. "How is he?" "His vitals are stable, but he's very upset. He's demanding to see you." I fell silent. Images of Lila's tear-streaked face and her cruel words flashed through my mind. "Dr. Hayes, I'll be there." I hung up the phone but didn't move. Why did he want to see me? To watch me worry and cry over him? To brag about his great, tragic love story? Ethan and I had been college classmates. We'd both joined Central General Hospital after graduation. He was a surgical prodigy, young, handsome, brilliant, the dream of every nurse and female doctor in the hospital. I was a plain, quiet cardiothoracic surgeon, invisible in a crowd. Everyone said I wasn't good enough for him, that I must have used some trick to make him marry me. I never argued, because I'd been the one to make the first move. The year we were up for promotion, his research paper had hit a snag with the data. I'd used my father's connections. My father was the former hospital president to fix everything for him. Shortly after, he'd proposed. The wedding had been grand and beautiful. He'd said, "Claire, thank you. I'll spend the rest of my life making you happy." I'd believed him. For 5 years, he'd been the perfect husband. He remembered my birthday, our anniversary. He'd leave a light on for me when I worked late. I'd thought that was love. Quiet, steady, forever. Until a year ago, when Lila Hale came back from abroad. She'd been Ethan's college girlfriend, the one that got away, the permanent mark on his heart. After she came back, everything changed. Ethan started coming home late. He put a password on his phone. Sometimes he'd come home smelling of another woman's perfume. Lila would call him at 2 in the morning, saying her car had broken down, or she had a fever, or she'd had a nightmare. Every single time, no matter how late, Ethan would rush over to her, I asked him what was going on between them. He said, "Lila's always been fragile. She had a hard time abroad. I'm just looking out for her like a sister." He said, "Claire, don't be ridiculous. You're the one I love." I'd believed him again. I told myself to be the bigger person, to be understanding. But what had my understanding gotten me? It had gotten me a husband who'd chosen another woman over me without a second thought. A husband who'd risked his life to protect her. And now, a husband who was waiting for me to come crawling back to him. My phone rang again. It was the ICU. I pressed the mute button. I stood up and walked out of the lounge. As I passed the ICU doors, I saw Mrs. Carter and Mia peering through the glass, their faces filled with concern. Lila was nowhere to be seen, probably tired from her performance and gone home to rest. I didn't stop. I walked straight to the parking lot. I went home to the house we'd shared for 5 years. Ethan's slippers were still by the front door. His blanket was draped over the couch where he'd watched the game last night. On the coffee table were the antacid and glass of lukewarm water I'd left out for him. Everywhere I looked, there were traces of him, and everywhere I looked, I was reminded of how stupid I'd been. I walked into the bedroom and opened the closet. On the left hung his clothes suits, dress shirts, casual wear all ironed perfectly and organized by color. Just how I'd always kept them. On the right were mine. I pulled out a suitcase and started packing my things. I didn't cry. I didn't hesitate. My movements were as calm and precise as if I were preparing for a routine surgery. I only took my own clothes and personal belongings. I didn't touch a single thing that belonged to this house, or to Ethan Carter. When I reached the jewelry box, my hands paused. Inside lay our wedding ring. The day Ethan had slipped it onto my finger. He'd said, "Claire, till death do us part." I'd once believed we'd be each other's forever. Now it just sounded like a cruel joke. I picked up the ring, small, simple, just the way I'd liked it. I'd treasured it so much that I'd always carefully put it away before every surgery. Now it felt like a heavy chain around my neck. I walked into the living room and set the ring on the coffee table, right next to the glass of lukewarm water he'd never gotten around to drinking. Then I pulled out my phone and booked the earliest flight to Germany. There was a global cardiac surgery summit in Berlin next week. The invitation had arrived at my office 2 weeks earlier. I'd already turned it down for Ethan. I'd said I couldn't leave my husband home alone. Looking back now, it was absolutely ridiculous. With the ticket booked, I dragged my suitcase to the door and took one last look at the house. There was nothing left here worth keeping. I closed the door, and with it, closed the book on my past. In the taxi, I called my assistant. "Lily, please put in a leave request for me. Tell the hospital there's a family emergency and I have to go abroad. Also, compile all the materials for Project A and hand them over to Dr. Robert Wilson. Dr. Hayes. When will you be back?" "I don't know," I said. "Maybe never." I'd barely arrived at the airport when Mrs. Carter's call came through. Her voice was sharp with impatience and command. "Claire, where the hell are you? Ethan woke up and wants to see you. Don't you know that?" "I know." My voice was completely flat. "Then get your ass over here. Do you want to make him worse? I swear, if anything happens to my son, I'll skin you alive." Her vicious insults blared through the speaker, making my ears ring. I held the phone away from my ear. "Isn't Lila Hale there taking care of him?" "You Mrs. Carter sputtered, then exploded with even more rage. "How dare you mention Lila? If it weren't for you, Ethan wouldn't be suffering like this. What kind of wife are you? Can't even keep your own man under control." I laughed. It was a soft, bitter sound, dripping with sarcasm. "He's a 34-year-old man, not a 3-year-old child. If he wants to charge into danger for love and play knight in shining armor, what am I supposed to do? Chain him to the bed? How dare you speak to me like that? How dare I?" My laugh died, and my voice turned icy. "Mrs. Carter, you should be asking your precious son how he dares. He risked his life for a woman who's not his wife. Did he ever stop to think about me? About our home? His heart only belongs to the one that got away. So fine, I'll give him what he wants. I don't want to be Mrs. Carter anymore. You can give the title to your beloved Lila. She's welcome to it." With that, I hung up and blocked her number. The world went quiet. The boarding announcement came over the speakers. I dragged my suitcase towards the gate. Behind me, another phone rang persistently. It was Mia. I didn't answer. I turned off my phone completely. As the plane took off, I looked down at the shrinking city below me. For the first time in years, I felt free. Goodbye, Ethan Carter. Goodbye, my pathetic 5 years. Meanwhile, in the ICU at Central General Hospital, Ethan Carter was throwing things in a fit of rage. I won't take my medicine. I won't drink any water. He winced in pain as the movement pulled at his stitches, but his face remained haughty. Get my wife here. Tell Claire to get her ass over here and take care of me, he yelled at the nurse. Otherwise I'm refusing all treatment. Let's see who dares take responsibility for that. He was certain Claire would come, just like she always did. No matter what he did, all he had to do was act hurt or angry, and she'd come running, begging for his forgiveness. He wanted her to know what happened when she crossed him. He wanted her on her knees at his bedside, begging him to get better. The terrified nurse didn't know what to do, so she called Ethan's buddy Jake, who was also a doctor at the hospital. When Jake arrived, Ethan had his eyes closed, speaking to the air with a look of fake devotion. Claire, I know you're angry, but Lila, she's been through so much. I can't just abandon her. Forgive me this once, okay? He was so wrapped up in his performance that he didn't notice Jake standing in the doorway, his face dark with disgust. Jake had had enough. He walked over and snatched the phone out of Ethan's hand. Dude, cut the crap. You deserve an Oscar for that performance. Ethan opened his eyes, annoyed to see him. What are you doing here? I told you to get Claire. Get her. Where the hell am I supposed to get her? Jake snapped. I can't reach her phone. Your mom and sister's numbers aren't going through either. She probably blocked all of you. Ethan blinked, then sneered. She's got some nerve. Playing hard to get. She thinks this'll make me cave. Dream on, he said with absolute confidence. Just wait. She'll be here within 3 hours, begging me to take her back. Jake looked at his stupid, arrogant face and shook his head with pity. He sighed and dialed a number, putting it on speakerphone. It was the airline customer service. Hello, how may I help you? Ethan frowned. What are you doing? Jake ignored him and spoke into the phone. Hi. I'm checking on a flight for a friend, Claire Hayes. ID number XXXX. Did she book a flight today? Ethan's face drained of color instantly. Jake, what the hell is wrong with you? He lunged for the phone, but the movement tore at his wound, making him gasp in pain. The sweet voice of the customer service agent came through clearly. Yes, sir. Ms. Hayes was booked on flight LH721 to Berlin, Germany, which departed half an hour ago. Ethan froze. Berlin. What was she doing in Germany? Jake hung up and tossed the phone back onto the bed. Dude, stop with the tragic lover act. She's done with you. Your wife already took off her wedding ring and flew to Germany for a medical summit, Jake said, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. She sent me a message before she left. Told me to pass it along to you. Ethan stared at him, his eyes bloodshot. What did she say? Jake cleared his throat and mimicked Claire's calm, emotionless tone. I hope those two cheaters grow old together and have a wonderful life. In that moment, Ethan's world fell apart. The arrogance and confidence vanished from his face, replaced by sheer, unadulterated panic. He grabbed his phone with shaking hands and frantically dialed Claire's number. I'm sorry. The number you have dialed is turned off. Turned off. She actually turned off her phone. He tried calling her on FaceTime. A red exclamation mark burned into his vision. This person is not your friend. Please send a friend request first. She'd blocked him. She'd blocked him on everything. Ethan roared like a caged animal and swept everything off the nightstand. The Monet oars blared with shrill alarms. Claire, get back here, he screamed, his voice filled with disbelief and despair. It had never occurred to him that Claire, the woman who'd always followed him around, whose eyes had always been on him, would leave so suddenly, so completely, without even giving him a chance to explain. The ICU alarms blared shrilly. Ethan's rage swept through the room like a hurricane. His heart rate spiked to 150 on the monitor, and his blood pressure fluctuated wildly. Patient's tachycardic from emotional distress. Hurry. Get the sedative. The head nurse rushed in, Taking charge of the chaotic scene, two young nurses tried to hold down his flailing arms. "Get off me, all of you. Get the hell away from me." He looked like an enraged lion, his eyes blazing red. "Where's Claire? Tell her to get back here and see me." Jake stood to the side, watching coldly. He didn't move, didn't speak, until the nurse administered a strong sedative. Ethan's struggles gradually weakened. He collapsed back onto the bed, gasping for breath. The pain from his torn wound made beads of sweat roll down his forehead, but the madness in his eyes didn't fade. He stared up at the ceiling, muttering Claire's name over and over. "Claire. You bitch. How dare you?" Jake pulled up a chair and sat down. "You done throwing your tantrum?" he asked. Ethan turned his head and glared at him with murderous intent. "You enjoying this?" "Not really." Jake shrugged. "I just think you got what you deserved." "You." Ethan tried to sit up again, but Jake pushed him back down. "Save your strength. Romeo, you look pathetic right now. You think Claire left because you took a knife for Lila? Because you were protecting her?" Jake leaned in, speaking slowly and deliberately. "She left because you never treated her like a human being. You took her love for granted. You thought you could trample on her feelings whenever you wanted. You were so sure she'd never leave you that you didn't even try to be a decent husband." "Ethan, you didn't lose to Lila. You lost to your own arrogance." These words cut through Ethan like knives, hitting him right where it hurt. He fell silent, not because he agreed, but because he had no argument. The sedative finally kicked in. His eyelids grew heavy, and he drifted off to sleep. Jake looked at his pale face and sighed. If only you'd known this would happen. He'd just stepped out of the ICU when he ran into Mrs. Carter and Mia. "Jake, how's my son? I heard he had another episode." Mrs. Carter grabbed his arm anxiously. "He just fell asleep." "Ma'am, where's that Claire woman? Is she back yet?" Mia demanded shrilly. Jake frowned. "She's not coming back." "What do you mean she's not coming back?" Mrs. Carter's voice rose sharply. "She's his wife. How dare she abandon him? She's already in Germany," Jake stated plainly. Mrs. Carter stared at him, as if she couldn't understand. "Gee. Germany. What's she doing in Germany?" "Ethan's lying in a hospital bed fighting for his life. She's attending a medical summit." "A medical summit?" Mia screeched. "She has the nerve to go to a conference. Her heart must be made of stone. My brother almost died saving someone, and she's off gallivanting around Europe." "Watch your mouth," Jake said coldly. "First of all, your brother didn't save a firefighter. He saved Lila Hale. Second, Claire is attending the most prestigious cardiac surgery summit in the world, not gallivanting. So what? Is a stupid conference more important than my brother's life? To her? Probably." Jake's words left Mia and Mrs. Carter speechless. They couldn't understand. In their minds, Claire was supposed to be nothing more than an accessory, revolving around Ethan's every need. How dare she have her own career, her own dreams? Just then, a delicate figure approached. It was Lila. She was carrying a thermos, and she greeted them timidly when she saw them. "Mrs. Carter, Mia, Dr. Miller." Mrs. Carter's face darkened at the sight of her, but she swallowed her anger, knowing her son would need someone to take care of him. "What are you doing here?" I made some soup for Ethan. I wanted to see him," Lila said, hanging her head like a dutiful wife. Mia rolled her eyes. Jake snorted and turned to leave. "Dr. Miller," Lila called after him. "Dr. Hayes." "Did she really leave?" "She did." "Is she coming back?" she asked carefully, a hint of hope in her eyes. Jake stopped and turned to look at her. "You'd better hope she doesn't, because if she does, you'll be the first one to regret it." With that, he walked away without looking back. Lila stood there frozen, her face turning pale. She didn't understand what Jake meant. All she knew was that Claire was gone. The woman who'd stood by Ethan's side as his legal wife was gone. She'd won. She carried her thermos over to the ICU window and looked in at the sleeping Ethan. A slow, triumphant smile spread across her face. "Ethan, from now on, I'll take care of you. I'll prove to everyone that I love you more than Claire ever did. And that I'm the one who's right for you." She was so wrapped up in her fantasies that she didn't notice the deep frown on Ethan's sleeping face, as if he were trapped in a terrible nightmare. The air in Berlin was crisp, carrying the coolness of early autumn. I stepped out of the airport and took a deep breath. It felt like I was finally exhaling all the toxic air I'd been breathing for the past 5 years. I didn't go to the hotel arranged by the conference. Instead, I'd booked an apartment hotel in the city center, with its own kitchen and living room. I needed a quiet, undisturbed space to sort out my thoughts and plan my future. I dragged my suitcase into the room and didn't rest first. Instead, I unpacked my clothes and hung them up one by one in the closet. I placed the few medical textbooks I'd brought on the desk. I arranged my toiletries on the bathroom shelf. I loved this feeling of control, taking a strange place and slowly making it my own. When I was done, I made myself a cup of black tea and stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, watching the busy streets below. My phone vibrated in my bag. It was the flight landing reminder I'd set before turning it off. I hesitated for a moment, then took it out and turned it on. Instantly, dozens of missed calls and text messages flooded in. From Mrs. Carter, from Mia, from a few unknown numbers. Most of them were from Ethan. Dozens of missed calls, dozens of text messages, starting with angry demands, then panicked pleas, and finally desperate begging. Claire, please come back. I know I was wrong. I'll give you anything you want. Just don't leave me. Our home can't be without you. Baby, I'm in pain. The last message was a single word. I stared at that word, feeling nothing. When your heart is dead, you don't feel pain anymore. I deleted all the messages without a single expression. Then I opened my email and saw the schedule from the summit organizers. Opening ceremony, gala dinner, panel discussions. My name was listed as a featured speaker in several important sessions, as an invited young expert. This was where I belonged. I turned off my phone, tossed it aside, and started preparing my presentation for tomorrow. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away at Central General Hospital, Ethan finally woke up from the sedative. The first thing he did was reach for his phone. When he saw all the red exclamation marks indicating failed messages, the light in his eyes slowly died. She still hasn't replied, he muttered, his voice hoarse. Just then, the door opened and Lila walked in carrying a bowl of soup. Ethan, you're awake. I made your favorite chicken vegetable soup. Come on, have some while it's hot. She poured a spoonful, blew on it gently, and held it to his lips. Ethan turned his head away. I don't want any. What's wrong? Are you in pain? Lila asked concernedly. I want you to leave, he said coldly. Lila's smile froze on her face. Ethan, what's the matter? Did I do something wrong? I said get the hell out. Ethan suddenly exploded, swatting the bowl out of her hand. It shattered on the floor with a loud crash. Hot soup splashed all over Lila's hands and legs. Ah! She screamed in pain. The back of her hand turned bright red instantly. Ethan, she looked at him with hurt eyes, tears welling up. I don't want you here. I don't want your fake, pitying care. Ethan yelled at her like a madman. This isn't what I want. Don't you get it? I don't want your stupid soup. I don't want you pretending to be the perfect wife. I want Claire. I want the apples she peels for me. I want the blanket she tucks around me after surgery. I want the antacid she leaves out for me even when we're fighting. You're not her. You'll never be her. He screamed until his voice was raw. Every word cut through Lila like a knife. She'd always thought Ethan loved her for who she was. She'd thought that once Claire was gone, she'd step seamlessly into her place. But in that moment, she realized the truth. Ethan might have loved her, but what he really missed was the comfortable, stable life Claire had built for him. He didn't need her specifically. He just was used to being loved and taken care of, and the person who'd given him all that, he'd pushed away with his own hands. Lila's tears finally fell, not from the pain of the burn, but from the crushing humiliation and disappointment. She knelt down awkwardly to pick up the broken pieces, but Ethan didn't even glance at her. He picked up his phone again and kept dialing that number that would never connect, over and over and over again, on the other side of town. After causing a scene at the hospital and getting nowhere, Mrs. Carter finally came up with a brilliant idea. She dug out my mother's phone number from her contacts. She was going to go to my parents' house and make a scene. She didn't believe Claire would abandon her own parents. She'd make them force me to come back. She'd make sure everyone knew what an ungrateful, heartless daughter I was. Mrs. Carter and Mia showed up at my parents' house in the late afternoon. They didn't call ahead, just rang the doorbell. My mother opened the door, expecting a delivery. "Can I help you?" "Oh, Mrs. Hayes, it's me, Ethan's mother." Mrs. Carter pushed her way inside, her face instantly contorting into an expression of utter grief. Mia followed behind her, carrying a bag of fruit like they were just coming for a visit. My father, who'd been watching the news in the living room, stood up. "Mrs. Carter, what brings you here?" His voice was polite but distant. Both my parents were intellectuals, and they'd never liked rude, uninvited guests. "If we don't come, my son will be dead," Mrs. Carter exclaimed, then suddenly dropped to the floor and started wailing, beating her thighs. "Why is my life so miserable? I raised a son, and your daughter has him lying half dead in a hospital bed, and she has the nerve to run off to Europe to enjoy herself, leaving us alone to suffer. How are we supposed to go on?" Mia joined in, dabbing at her eyes dramatically. "Uncle, Auntie, please talk some sense into Claire. My brother's dying. He won't eat or drink. He won't listen to anyone. He only wants to see Claire. How can she be so cruel?" My parents were completely stunned by this outburst. My father was the first to recover. He stepped in front of my mother, his face darkening. "Mrs. Carter, please get up. We can talk about this calmly. What did Claire do to Ethan, and how did Ethan end up in the hospital? What did she do?" Mrs. Carter stopped crying and her voice rose to a shriek. "You have the nerve to ask me. You should ask your precious daughter. She couldn't keep her own man under control, so he was out cheating on her every night, and now he got stabbed fighting over that homewrecker. He's still in the ICU. She twisted the truth completely, putting all the blame on me." My father's frown deepened. My mother's face turned pale. "Mrs. Carter, what are you talking about? What do you mean Claire couldn't keep Ethan under control?" "Exactly what I said," Mia cut in. "Ethan and Lila were meant to be together. Claire stole him from her using underhanded tactics. Now that Ethan wants to be with the woman he loves, Claire threw a fit and ran away. She's a jinx. That's what she is. That's a lie." My mother trembled with anger. "Our Claire would never do something like that. You know it's true." Mrs. Carter jumped to her feet and pointed a finger at my parents. "I'm telling you right now, if you don't make Claire come back and get on her knees and beg Ethan for forgiveness, and if anything happens to my son, I'll make sure your whole family pays for it." She looked like a common street thug, nothing like the refined lady she'd pretended to be when our families were arranging the marriage. My father's face turned icy cold. He'd been a respected professor his whole life, with students all over the country. He'd never been insulted like this in his life. "Mrs. Carter," he said, his voice low and authoritative. "First of all, Ethan is an adult. His decision to fight someone and get stabbed for another woman is his own responsibility. It has nothing to do with Claire. Second, Claire is also an adult. She has every right to leave and pursue her career. As her parents, we have no right to interfere, and neither do you. Third, I know my daughter better than anyone. She's never given us a single day of trouble in her life. If she's decided to end her marriage, it's because that marriage has failed her completely." My father looked her straight in the eye, speaking slowly and clearly. "Instead of throwing a screaming tantrum here, you should go home and ask your son what he did to drive away such a wonderful wife. And as for getting on her knees and begging, that's ridiculous. The Hayes family doesn't do that. The door is over there. Goodbye." He showed them the door. Mrs. Carter and Mia were speechless. They'd never expected the mild-mannered Hayeses to be so firm. Their faces turned red with embarrassment, and they left with their tails between their legs. My mother watched them go, tears of anger in her eyes. What is wrong with those people? What did our poor Claire do to deserve this? My father put his arm around her and comforted her. Don't worry, I know our daughter. She wouldn't have made this decision lightly. We just need to support her. Even so, my father was worried. He contacted Jake, who was on duty at the hospital, through a former student. Jake told him everything that had happened, how Ethan had taken a knife for Lila, how he'd demanded Claire come take care of him in the ICU, how he'd lost his mind when she left, and of course, all the terrible things Mrs. Carter and Mia had done. After hanging up the phone, my father was silent for a long time. Then he sent me a message, not through text or social media. He sent an urgent email to the summit organizers, marking it as from a family member of a participant. He knew my personal phone was probably turned off or blocked, but I would definitely check my official conference email. The email was short. Daughter, don't worry about us. Everything is fine at home. Go do what you need to do. We are so proud of you. If you need anything, just let us know. I saw the email during the gala dinner. I was holding a glass of champagne, chatting animatedly with a German Nobel laureate, when my phone pinged with an email notification. I excused myself politely and walked to a quiet corner to check it. The moment I read the words, all the noise and music around me faded away. My eyes filled with tears. I knew my father wasn't telling the truth when he said everything was fine. Mrs. Carter and Mia would never let it go. They'd definitely gone to my parents' house to make trouble. He'd said it was fine just to keep me from worrying. I took a deep breath and composed myself. I didn't reply to the email. Instead, I called my lawyer back in the States. Mr. Anderson, it's Claire Hayes. A calm, professional voice came through the line. Hello, Ms. Hayes. I need you to do two things for me, I said, my voice completely steady. First, draw up divorce papers immediately. I'm waiving all claims to marital property, but I want every penny of my personal assets back. Second, file a restraining order on behalf of my parents against Ethan's mother and sister for harassment and threats. I want them to pay for what they've done. I turned off my phone and collapsed onto the soft bed. The night in Berlin was quiet, but my mind was racing. My father's words, everything is fine, had pricked my heart like a needle. I knew him too well. The Carters had definitely been there, and he'd definitely handled it. Feeling uneasy, I turned my phone back on and called home. My father answered. Claire. His voice was as calm as ever. No hint of emotion. Dad, is Mom okay? She's fine. We're both fine. Don't worry about us. Just focus on your conference. Did they come to the house? I asked directly. There was a brief silence on the other end. Yes, my father admitted, but it's taken care of. How did you handle it? I pressed. I just had a chat with a few old friends, my father said casually. I understood immediately. My father's old friends included Dr. Michael Thompson, the current president of Central General Hospital, and several other influential figures in the city's medical community. He didn't need to yell or threaten. All he had to do was tell them the truth, how Ethan had charged into danger for love, how Mrs. Carter had lied and slandered our family. Those men, who'd known my father for decades, would know exactly what to do. It was more effective than any lawyer's letter. It was an invisible net, woven from reputation and personal connections, and Ethan and his family were already trapped in it. Thank you, Dad, I said sincerely. Don't be silly. Honey, you're our daughter. My father laughed softly. Just be happy. That's all we want. Go do whatever you need to do. Your father's got your back, no matter what. After hanging up the phone, the last of my worries melted away. Meanwhile, back at Central General Hospital, another drama was unfolding. Dr. Thompson, the hospital president, had come to Ethan's ward personally. He didn't bring any fruit or flowers, and there was no smile on his face. Lila was wiping Ethan's face when she saw him, and her hand trembled. Dr. Thompson. Dr. Thompson didn't even glance at her. His eyes were fixed directly on Ethan. Carter, he said, I hear you almost got yourself killed over a woman. Ethan's face turned pale, and he tried to sit up. Dr. Thompson. Don't speak. Just listen. Dr. Thompson cut him off. You were our youngest star surgeon. We had big plans for you. Both I and Dr. Hayes thought you had a bright future ahead of you. But look at you now. What have you done? His voice was quiet, but it carried immense weight. I don't usually interfere in my employees' personal lives, but when your family shows up at Dr. Hayes' house screaming and threatening people, and your little affair becomes the talk of the entire medical community. You've embarrassed this hospital, and you've embarrassed Dr. Hayes. Dr. Thompson's voice rose with anger as he pointed a finger at Ethan. I'm not here to visit you. I'm here to give you an ultimatum. You have 1 week to clean up this mess. I don't care if you have to beg or apologize, or whatever, but if I hear one more word about this, or if Dr. Hayes and his family are bothered by your family one more time, you're fired. We don't need your kind of drama at Central General Hospital. With that, Dr. Thompson turned and stormed out. The room fell deathly silent. Ethan sat on the bed, stunned, as if all the life had been drained out of him. For the first time, his career, the thing he'd always been so proud of, was in real danger. And all because of the woman he'd thought he could control, and her family, who'd seemed so gentle and harmless. He finally realized he hadn't messed with a quiet, crying housewife. He'd messed with someone he could never defeat. Lila stood to the side, her face white as a sheet, her body trembling. For the first time, she truly understood the vast, uncrossable gap between her and Claire Hayes. I knew nothing about the storm brewing back home. My last day in Berlin was wonderful. At the closing gala dinner, I was awarded the Young Innovator Award. As I stood under the spotlights in my black evening gown, delivering my acceptance speech in fluent English, I saw the approving looks from all the top experts in the room. In that moment, I knew without a doubt that leaving Ethan had been the best decision of my life. A woman's light should never be dimmed by the dust of a bad marriage. After the dinner, an elegant German man approached me. His name was Klaus, and he was the director of the Berlin Heart Center. Dr. Hayes. Congratulations, he said, raising his glass. Your paper was exceptional. Would you consider staying here in Berlin to work? He made me a formal offer, promising me the best team and the most cutting-edge equipment. It was an opportunity any cardiac surgeon would jump at. I'll admit, I was tempted. Staying here would mean a fresh start. No one would know about my past. No Ethan, no drama. I took his business card and told him I'd think about it carefully. After the dinner, I walked alone through the streets of Berlin. The cool evening breeze cleared my head. Suddenly, my phone rang. It was an unknown number from back in the States. I frowned and answered. Claire. It was Ethan's voice, hoarse, weak, and desperate. I immediately went to hang up. Don't, he cried, as if he could see me. Please, don't hang up. Just let me say a few words. That's all I ask. There was a desperation in his voice I'd never heard before. I stopped walking and said nothing. I was wrong, Claire. I'm so sorry. I never should have chosen Lila over you. I never should have hurt you. He rambled incoherently on the other end of the line. Please come back. We don't have to get divorced. I'll do anything you want. Anything. I'll cut Lila out of my life completely. I'll get on my knees and beg your parents for forgiveness. Claire. Our home can't be without you. He started crying, a 34-year-old man, sobbing like a child over the phone. I listened silently. I felt nothing, not even anger, just a faint sense of amusement. If only he'd thought about this before. Are you done? I asked coldly. His crying stopped abruptly. Ethan, I said, my voice clear and sharp. Do you really think that if you cry a little and say you're sorry, I'll forgive you just like I always did? Do you think I left you just to throw a tantrum? There was dead silence on the other end. You're wrong. I'm not waiting for you to come back. I'm saying goodbye to the stupid, naive girl I used to be. We're done. We've been done since the moment you chose to protect another woman instead of me. I will never forget what you did to me, and I will make you pay for every single thing. With that, I hung up before he could say another word. Then I blocked the number and deleted it. Done. I looked down at Klaus's business card in my hand. His offer echoed in my mind. Staying in Berlin seemed like the perfect option, but I knew I couldn't. Some battles you have to fight yourself. Some things you have to settle in person. I was going back. Not for him. For me. I wanted him to see with his own eyes how much better my life was without him. I wanted him to regret every single thing he'd done to me, for the rest of his life. I didn't tell anyone I was coming back. When the plane landed, I went straight to my pre-marriage apartment. After a quick cleanup, I went to the hospital the next day. Not Central General, My hospital, Maplewood University Hospital, where I'd worked for 10 years. I needed to tie up some loose ends and see my wonderful colleagues and patients one last time. My mentor, who was now the hospital president, called me into his office. "You're really sure about this?" he sighed. "Yes," I nodded. "Where are you going?" "I don't know yet. Maybe take a break for a while." "Is this because of that Carter boy?" The president frowned. "I heard what happened. The nerve of him. If you're upset about it, just tell me. I'll go find his father and give him a piece of my mind." I laughed. "It's okay, Dr. Carter. It's all in the past. I just came back to close that chapter of my life." The president looked at my determined face and didn't argue further. "All right." He patted my shoulder. "You're Dr. Hayes' daughter, and my best student. Don't let anyone push you around. No matter where you go, I'll keep your file here. This place will always be your home if you ever want to come back." As I walked out of his office, my eyes filled with tears. I walked down the familiar hallways, smiling and nodding at every colleague I passed. Their eyes held surprise and concern, but no pity. I knew I'd made the right choice. Just as I was about to leave, I saw someone standing at the hospital entrance. Ethan. He was wearing a crumpled hospital gown, with a trench coat slung loosely over his shoulders. His hair was a mess, his chin covered in stubble. He'd lost a lot of weight, his eyes sunken deep in his face. He looked gaunt and broken. He stood across the street, staring at me without moving, like a man waiting desperately for his wife to return. I had no idea how long he'd been standing there, or how he'd found out I was here. The moment he saw me, his eyes lit up. It was the look of a man who'd been wandering the desert for 3 days and finally saw water. He tried to walk towards me, but his steps were unsteady, his body swaying as if he might collapse at any moment. A car sped past him, honking loudly, but he didn't even flinch. The driver leaned out the window and yelled, "Watch where you're going, idiot." But he didn't hear. His whole world had narrowed down to just me. He stood there, across the busy street, staring at me. Then he smiled. It was the saddest smile I'd ever seen. He mouthed words to me, over and over again. "Come back." "I'm sorry." I stared back at him, my face completely blank. Then I raised my hand and slowly flipped him off. With that, I turned and got into a taxi. In the rearview mirror, I saw him running after the car like a madman, screaming my name. Finally, he tripped and fell in the middle of the street, like a dog that had been abandoned by its owner. I looked away, leaned back in the seat, and closed my eyes. The driver glanced at me in the mirror and asked cautiously, "Ma'am, is that man a friend of yours?" "No," I said, opening my eyes and looking out the window at the passing scenery. "I don't know him." I turned down Klaus's offer. I also politely declined job offers from several top hospitals in the country. I needed a break. A long, complete break from everything. Just as I was about to book a ticket to a tropical island, my father called. His voice was unusually serious. "Claire, there's something I need you to come back for." "What is it, Dad?" "Do you remember Dr. Arthur Parker?" Of course I did. Dr. Parker was a member of the National Academy of Sciences, a recipient of the National Medal of Science, a national treasure, and my father's closest friend. "Dr. Parker's heart is failing," my father said gravely. "He has a very complex aortic dissection combined with a coronary artery tear. The local team has been consulting for 3 days, and no one is willing to operate." My heart sank. This was one of the most difficult cases in cardiac surgery, with an extremely high mortality rate. They recommended someone. My father paused. "Who?" "Ethan Carter." My hand tightened around the phone. "Him." I laughed bitterly. "What makes him think he can do this? He hasn't been sitting around since he was fired from Central General." My father said calmly, "He's been begging everyone he knows, visiting every old expert in town. He even knelt outside his former mentor's house for an entire day and night. He wants this surgery to be his comeback story. He wants to prove to everyone that he's still the brilliant, irreplaceable surgeon he used to be." I understood. This was his last bet. He was gambling with the life of a national treasure to save his own career. It was selfish. It was insane. The hospital and the family both refused. My father continued, "Ethan's reputation is too damaged now. No one trusts him. So I recommended you, Claire. I know this isn't fair to you, but Dr. Parker doesn't have time to wait. You're the only one who has the skill and the experience to pull this off. There was a long silence on the phone. I could almost hear my father's heavy breathing. He knew how cruel it was to ask me to stand on the aim stage as Ethan again. Okay, I said softly, after a long moment. I'll do it. I wasn't doing it for Ethan. I wasn't doing it for fame or glory. I was doing it because I was a doctor. And when a human life is on the line, personal grievances don't matter. When I walked back into Central General Hospital, all eyes turned to me. There was admiration, curiosity, and even some pity, but I kept my eyes straight ahead and walked directly into the conference room. The room was filled with gray-haired experts. Ethan was there too. He was sitting in the farthest corner, wearing an old, faded suit. He looked like a skeleton, his eyes bloodshot and hollow. The moment he saw me, he jumped to his feet. His whole body trembled with emotion. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. I didn't even glance at him. My eyes went straight to Dr. Thompson, who was sitting at the head of the table, looking worried. Dr. Thompson, I said, my voice cool and professional. Where are the patient's files? My arrival was like a sharp knife, cutting through Ethan's last remaining hope. He became nothing more than a pathetic, irrelevant background character in this story of redemption. The surgery was scheduled for the next morning. It was the most anticipated operation in the history of Central General Hospital. The observation room was packed with department heads and experts from all over the city. Ethan was there too, not as a surgeon, as a spectator, a defeated man who'd been allowed in to watch. He stood by the glass window, like a statue of despair. He needed to see it with his own eyes, to watch me perform the surgery he'd dreamed of, but would never be allowed to do, to watch me defeat him completely in the one thing he'd always thought he was best at. I put on my scrubs and walked into the operating room. The surgical lights came on. I stood at the operating table, and it felt like coming home to a battlefield I'd missed. Scalpel, I said, holding out my hand. My voice was calm and steady. The surgery began. Incision, cardiopulmonary bypass, deep hypothermic circulatory arrest. Every step was precise. Like a textbook example. The observation room was silent. Everyone was awestruck by my smooth, confident technique. Ethan stared at the screen, sweat beading on his forehead. Then, at the most critical moment, the aortic replacement disaster struck. The patient's artery walls, weakened by years of calcification, were as fragile as glass. As I was suturing, a new tear appeared. The patient's blood pressure dropped instantly. Beep, beep, beep. The monitors blared shrilly. The observation room erupted in murmurs. Everyone held their breath. It's over, one old expert muttered. No one can save him now. A faint, sick smile crossed Ethan's face. He was waiting for me to fail, waiting for me to panic. But I didn't. I didn't even frown. Graft patch, I said quickly. Prepare autologous pericardium. In less than 10 minutes. I fixed the fatal tear using a new technique I'd learned in Berlin, one no one in the room had ever seen before. The patient's blood pressure returned to normal. The alarms stopped. The observation room was dead silent for a moment. Then, thunderous applause broke out. Everyone stood up, clapping for the miraculous surgery. But Ethan, all the strength drained from his body, he slid down the glass wall until he was sitting on the floor. All the jealousy and anger was gone from his face. All that was left was utter, complete despair. The despair of someone whose entire world had just collapsed. He finally understood. The gap between us wasn't about love anymore. It was worlds apart. The talent he'd been so proud of was nothing compared to mine. He'd lost, completely. He'd lost his love, his career, and the last shred of his dignity as a surgeon. Lila had somehow snuck into the observation room too. She looked at Ethan crumpled on the floor, her expression complicated. She didn't go over to help him. She just stood there, watching him like he was a stranger. Then she turned and walked away silently. She knew this man was broken. He would never be anything again. The surgery lasted 10 hours. When I walked out of the operating room, it was dark outside. I took off my mask, exhausted, and breathed a long sigh of relief. Dr. Parker's family and the hospital administrators immediately surrounded me. Dr. Hayes, thank you. You saved our entire family. Claire, that was incredible. We're all so proud of you. I smiled and thanked them one by one. As I walked through the crowd, I saw my father standing at the end of the hallway. He didn't say anything. He just gave me a thumbs up. His eyes were red. I knew I'd made him proud. I took a shower, changed into my own clothes, and prepared to leave. In the hospital parking lot, I saw Ethan. He was standing by my car. The night wind blew through his empty coat, making him look even thinner. Claire, he called out. His voice was barely a whisper. I stopped walking, but didn't turn around. Congratulations, he said. That was a perfect surgery. I said nothing. I always thought I was the sky. He laughed bitterly. I thought I'd given you everything. The title of Mrs. Carter, a comfortable life. I thought you'd be nothing without me. But today, I finally realized, I'm not the sky. I'm just a cage. And you're an eagle. I was the cage that trapped you. He slowly walked towards me. He stopped when he was 3 steps away. Then he bent down and bowed deeply, a full 90 degrees. I'm sorry, he said, and thank you. Thank you for showing me how small and ridiculous I really am. With that, he stood up straight, turned around, and walked away into the night. His back was hunched, his shoulders slumped. He looked like an old man, decades older than his 34 years. I stood there, watching him disappear. For a long time, no hate, no love, just a profound, peaceful silence. The next day, I left the city. I didn't go anywhere exotic. I went back to the small New England coastal town where I'd grown up. I rented a little house with a yard. I planted roses and daisies all around. I put down my scalpel for good. I started learning to paint, to play the piano, to bake artisanal pastries. I turned my life into a poem. Occasionally, Jake would send me a message. He said Ethan had completely disappeared. No one knew where he'd gone. Some said he'd moved to a remote mountain town to teach. Others said he'd become a monk. There were 100 rumors, but no one knew the truth. He was like a shooting star after burning bright for a brief, ugly moment. He'd vanished into the darkness forever. And me, I sit in my little yard. The sun is shining. The breeze is soft. A cat jumps onto my lap and yawns lazily. I stroke its fur, and a small smile tugs at the corner of my mouth. I know, my life is just beginning. I'm free.